there, Wise Pineapples. Today's guest has a story that might surprise you. They started in hospitality working at Marriott and Key Lime Cove Water Resort while in college, and along the way, they discovered something powerful about what makes people stay, thrive, and feel like they truly belong. That lesson eventually led them to make a pretty big yes in their life. Today, Jordan serves as Director of Educational Programming at Iowa Safe Schools, developing LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, training educators, and helping organizations understand what it really means to create a welcoming environment. And as if that wasn't enough, Jordan is also the owner of Current Coffee in Des Moines, Iowa, a small business built around connection, care, and community. So today we're talking about hospitality, belonging, leadership, and what happens when you say yes to work that truly matters. Jordan Mix, welcome to the Yes Show. Welcome to the Yes Show. I'm your host, Christine Trippy. Each week we'll explore the life-changing power of saying yes, along with hotel leadership made easy. Get ready for inspiration, fun, and sweet hospitality. Let's go. Jordan, we are so glad to have you. Let's start at the beginning. You actually started your career in hospitality. What were you doing at Marriott and in coffee shops, and how did you find the Wise Pineapple?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, very glad to be here. Second of all, I started with Marriott and coffee when I was in college, but if we're taking it all the way back to my very beginning with hospitality, I actually started at Key Lime Cove in Gurnee. Yeah. And so I think that I started at Key Lime Cove shortly after you left for your next opportunity. But I was a high school student. I was working at Island Temptations selling fudge and chocolate covered pretzels and coffee. And that was really my first sort of dive into hospitality and being challenged with meeting sales metrics for the first time.
Mm.
It was very different than like the previous babysitting gigs that I had had as a young teenager. But very quickly learned that the way to get people to buy things from you is to be nice to them. Um,
I
and
love that this is one of your first lessons.
Yes, I mean, we would have competitions to see, which crew member could sell the most, like 3 packs of chocolate covered pretzels, right? And we would have a little whiteboard in the back, and we would tally them up at the end of our shifts. And I always blew it out of the water, despite being I am truly like a pretty quiet person. I listen a lot. I'm not known for just speaking to fill the air. And so I think my teammates were kind of shocked that I was suddenly like pulling ahead in the chocolate covered pretzels competitions. But truly, just asking folks, how has your stay been? Or asking the kids in particular, what was your favorite
Mhm.
part of today? Talk to me about your favorite water slide. Did you get that big bucket of water dumped on you? Like all of those things are just ways to engage people in conversation, and people want to stick around and talk to you and frankly buy things from you if you're willing to have that conversation. And so as like a 17-year-old, I was really learning those lessons. Um, but fast forward to really the most of what I did in capital H hospitality was through Marriott. Worked there through college and into graduate school, just initially as a front desk guest associate, guest
Mhm.
services associate, and then worked my way up to front desk manager by the time I was in grad school,
Mm.
before finally taking a step back to pivot to specialty coffee, which I for a while was doing both at the same time. But the schedule with being in grad school, and I was in a long distance relationship at the time, and
Mhm.
the I was on the night shift at Marriott, and I loved it, but it was just not working in my schedule anymore.
Yeah,
So
I understand. Okay, I have
yeah,
to go back to a couple things.
yeah, go back,
First
yeah.
of all, we're gonna get to it, but I just recently spoke at your event,
Hmm.
and we didn't even know about this connection of Key Lime Cove. And she was
No,
reading my bio to introduce me, and she's like, "Wait, I just saw that you worked at Key Lime Cove, and this is
yeah.
the first." So you probably never noticed Tukey on my
Dookie,
shelf.
oh my gosh, yeah.
And the one thing I'm so sad about, oh, it's right here. I got it right here. Is that you started after we had crew cards.
Yes, I did. We didn't do the crew cards when I started, but it is when you were telling me about them, they were very, very cool. Have you
Yeah.
explained crew cards on the pod before?
I don't think I have. So let me do that.
Yeah.
Crew Cards was a little culture piece that I created upon opening Key Lime Cove Water Resort. Every single team member had basically their own baseball card, their crew card. And little Kiwis, our key limers, they could come up to any team member and collect their crew card. But we had a special thing we had to do with them. We couldn't just give them our card. We had to ask them three fun questions to make it an experience. And anyways, crew cards were the most amazing thing I think I've ever created.
No,
But when
they
you told me that you also worked at Key Lime, it just it melted my heart. I have such a special place in my heart for Key Lime.
it was a special place, and it really is a place that I think thrived on guest interaction. Not that all hospitality doesn't thrive on that, but I think when you have parents who generally, like, I feel like, the most common type of guest was parents with young kids.
Hmm.
And that's like a really special core memory that those families are forming together. And to be able to be a part of that and to be able to tap into that and say, I want to be a part of what makes this a great experience for you, I think is really special. And I think the cards are a really great way to engage the kids in particular,
Hmm. Hmm.
and challenge both them and you to kind of build that relationship. Um,
Yes,
I think it's really,
because it also, just like you mentioned, you were a high schooler, first time real job.
yeah,
Almost every team member crew member that I hired was in the exact same. They were in high
yeah,
school, they were 17, 16 years old, and it helped teach them to be hospitality leaders. It was a task that helped them to be hospitable. So
yes.
yeah, it was just such a fun thing. I still stay in touch with so many of those young key limers, and now they're adults and have
Yep.
families and big careers, and it's just so great. Which actually leads me into my next question for you.
Yeah.
I loved your LinkedIn post that mentioned that it is said that everyone should work in hospitality at least once in their life. So I want to ask you, what is one of your biggest lessons that you learned and took away from that hospitality experience?
Yeah, I said it on LinkedIn and I said it in person at the conference that you spoke at, part of my opening remarks. I think that working in hospitality is something that gives you the perspective of the way that you show up in the world affecting other people. Um, and
Yes.
so for me, that core lesson was that I had a lot of power. They say that emotions are contagious, right? And
Mhm.
one of my favorite leadership books is called Resonant Leadership, and it talks all about how the emotional intelligence it takes to be an effective leader is contagious. And part of that work is not only regulating yourself, but also in doing so, being able to affect your team and the people who are coming into your space as guests or patrons or clients.
Mhm.
And so for me, working in hospitality really taught me that lesson firsthand, right? You have stressed out business travelers who have a delayed flight and they're coming in to your check-in at your courtyard property at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and they have to be up at 7 to go to their first morning meeting. And they're grumpy, they're stressed. They don't know if the bistro is still open or going to have anything they want to eat. But if you can show them that you're glad that they're there with you and you're willing to, go the extra mile, which in hospitality is like, can I send up some extra towels, right? It's not like
Right.
you don't have to do these crazy elaborate bending over backwards things. It is really just identifying those basic needs and being willing to meet them as if it's just no big deal, right? And I carry those lessons with me in every part of my life now.
I love that. I want to reconfirm. What was that book? Resident Leadership?
Resonant leadership.
Resonant Leadership.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
that's great. So that's a great recommendation out there for all of you as well. I love that.
Yeah.
And yes, exactly. It's like I'll make you a peanut butter and jelly. You just got off the red eye,
Yeah.
It's just
Oh,
the simple
absolutely.
things. So many people think that it's the big upgrades, or I have to work at the Ritz-Carlton, or I have to have a lot of money to be able to do amenities. It's not that. It is just the kindness and the thoughtfulness that we can do every day. That's what makes us extraordinary. And you might not have ever noticed this, but the word extraordinary is ordinary with a
Mhm.
little extra on the
Like a
front.
little extra. Yeah.
Right? It is just ordinary stuff done a little extra well.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
it really is as simple as a PB&J or a
Yes.
bag of microwave popcorn, and those are very attainable, low cost things for the property, and it goes
Yes.
so far for guests who are
And
Just
even farther, that's even freer, remembering their name.
yes. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
absolutely. Remembering their name, um, regulars, people. I mean, just checking out your. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. Your manifest before people ever check in.
Mm-hmm.
If you know you're waiting for one person and it's the middle of the night, that's probably going to be the person who's walking in, right?
Yes.
And being able to greet them with their name can go such a long way.
Yes. And you know what? I have done GSS deep dives, guest service survey deep dives
Mm-hmm.
with hundreds and hundreds of properties. And do you know one thing I see time and time and time and time again? I ask for a quiet room and they put me by the ice machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just those little things. And then, maybe you did even see it and you did reserve them away. But upon check-in, even just saying, "Oh, Mr. Smith, we noticed your request and we've put you in a nice quiet room up in the top
Yep.
floor. No one's going to walk on top of you. You're not going to be by the ice. You don't have to go on that far." But just mentioning it and letting them know before they walk all the way up there, you've done it and you
Yep.
saw that is the extra in
Yep.
ordinary to be
Yep.
extraordinary.
Yeah, for me, one of my like very concrete memories of that is we had a regular at one of my properties. His name was Kent, and he always had a wake up call at 6 a.m. for every stay he had with us. And so when he would come in, it was Kent, great to see you. I've got your room all reserved. He had a preferred room, and if we could give it to him, we always would. Got your wake up call scheduled. Just like those little things to let him know that you know who he is. Yeah, it just goes such a long way.
Oh, such a long way. Oh my gosh. So you're just my kind of person. So let's get to your big yes, Jordan. You said yes to moving back to Iowa from
Yes.
the incredibly beautiful state of Utah
Yeah.
to leave hospitality and accept a position with Iowa Safe Schools.
Mhm.
So, what I want you to do is, I want you to tell us about the work you're doing with Iowa Safe Schools and the impact that you're hoping to create. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Iowa Safe Schools is the Midwest's largest LGBTQ youth serving organization, and the heart and soul of our work here is to uh, help improve outcomes for LGBTQ students across the state of Iowa. And we do that certainly through providing those direct services to youth themselves. The supportive services they might need in schools, working with them one-on-one to address instances of bullying, for example,
Mhm.
cultivating leadership skills. But the work that I specifically do in this organization is work with adults. My job is to help parents, teachers, youth serving professionals, faith leaders, potential employers identify and meet the needs of LGBTQ young people across the state, with the goal of not only cultivating those safe and affirming environments for them in their youth, but also making sure that they can see a future for themselves here in the state of Iowa. For listeners who are not familiar with Iowa, is so many people who don't live here are
Yeah,
not.
I'm your neighbor, and I did not realize this, and I
Right. And
felt it
until
when
I
I
lived
was
here, I
there.
didn't either.
Yeah,
But Iowa is a state where young people are fleeing very regularly. It's not a state that is retaining a lot of its young talent. And I did not grow up here. I'm from the Chicagoland area originally, but I came here to go to college in 2012, stuck around here for a bit after, and then moved around the country to go to grad school, and then to Utah with my wife, which is a different story. But when I made the choice to come back here and do this work with Iowa Safe Schools, it was because I never ever was a young person who just knew what I wanted to do with my life. All I could ever articulate was I just want to help people. I want to serve
yeah.
people in some way. And I didn't really know how I wanted to do that. Um, but I was an active leader in my high school's GSA, which stands for Gay Straight Alliance, or Gender and Sexuality Alliance for LGBTQ youth in their schools. I was also very involved in that organization at my college here in Des Moines, Iowa, and continued to kind of do just some contract or pro bono work with people who said, I can identify that we want to be able, as an organization, as a church, etc., to be able to show up for LGBTQ people in our spaces, but we don't really know how to do that. And you
Mhm.
are a person that I trust to not make me feel bad about not knowing how to do that,
Right.
can help me along that path. And so I did a lot of that work just as I was doing other things. And then when this job came open with Iowa Safe Schools, I said, what if that is the way I serve people? I have all of this experience and training in hospitality. I'm very good at serving people. I'm very good at anticipating those needs, at
Mhm.
making people feel safe and welcome. which I think is a really important piece of the work I'm doing now, because it's not just about making sure that LGBTQ people have those safe and affirming spaces. It is also about making sure that people who need to learn have those safe spaces in order to learn effectively. Because if we
Mhm.
are very worried about being wrong or offending somebody and like all of the anxiety that comes with that concern, we can't learn effectively. Yeah.
First of all, I love it. From the moment you called me about your conference, because their conference was all about hospitality,
Hmm.
and that was your theme. And you had thought of me because you, a long time ago, were on my wife's pineapple
Yes. And
Facebook
I
group.
didn't even answer that question at the beginning. I'm sorry.
Oh
Yeah. When
no,
I
yeah,
was working at Marriott, I got connected with the West
yeah.
Pineapple as like a resource. And from there on, I've just been
Right.
following it.
And that's how you just knew of me and reached out to me. But here's what I want to tell you is, first of all, the work when you called me, I was like, oh, so honored to be a part of this organization. So I was so grateful for you thinking of me. But watching you deliver your opening statements, your opening remarks, watching you conduct the conference, you are so extraordinary. And I mean this so genuinely. You are a natural speaker. You are a natural speaker. You are a natural leader. You have and thought leader as well. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you are running a hotel, if you're listening and you're running
Yeah.
a hotel and you would like some resources on how to be
Yes.
more inclusive or how to help in that way, there are organizations. And where
Yes.
would you recommend, like, if you don't know, oh, Iowa Safe Schools, where would you recommend, where would you start to look for somebody like that?
Yeah, so if you're regardless of where you're working, but hotels, coffee shops,
Right.
any kind of industry, hospitality in particular, which by the way, the hospitality industry is a very common industry for LGBTQ individuals to end up in as
Yes.
employees. So I really think that it's especially important for hospitality professionals, hospitality employers to get connected with these resources.
Mhm.
Look, just Google LGBTQ organization and then whatever state you're in.
Mhm.
Whether it's Outfront, Minnesota, Center on Halsted in Illinois, nearly every state will have one of those. And if they don't, you can always check out the Human Rights Campaign that has a lot of
Mhm.
really great resources, regardless of which state you're in. Sometimes those state-specific resources can help make sure that you are also taking into account your state level laws, which sometimes are a little bit more restrictive than federal legislation.
Mhm.
But there are many, many resources out there.
Mhm.
And yeah, there are people in all of those organizations who are very ready and eager to help you
To
figure out how to
help.
do this better. Yeah.
Yes. So that's a good segue to this question. The hospitality versus inclusion. In hospitality, we talk about making people feel welcome. And that's why I really feel that our industry does have a lot of LGBTQ community. So
Yeah.
where do you see that connection between great hospitality and inclusive environments? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I very firmly believe that you cannot have in a property, a business that is truly welcoming and hospitable to your guests and patrons if you do not first cultivate that culture internally.
Yes.
I think is it Southwest Airlines that's like the really famous example of the way
Mhm.
they were able to create that internal company culture that then just exuded out into everyone they were trying to get to switch over from one of the big three airlines, 30,
Mhm.
40 years ago. And they were, at least at the time, like very like highly regarded as a team that was doing that really well. And there are all of these examples of the CEO and the kind of like internal culture manager for the way they were cultivating that internally first in order to be able to demonstrate to employees this is what that looks like, this is what that feels like, and think about how much more excited you are to come to work and be a part of this when you know that's how you're going to be feeling about it. And if you can't have that internally, you're never going to be able to truly have it externally in a way that is authentic.
Right.
Um, I think humans are so good, probably initially as a survival mechanism, at picking up on very subtle body language cues, tone of voice cues that signal whether or not they are safe in whatever environment they're in.
Mhm.
And so if your team is not feeling safe and secure at work, they're not going to be able to make people in your space feel that way.
Right.
If you have a team who is feeling like really taken advantage of, overworked, underappreciated, and you're expecting them to welcome guests, who are checking in the middle of the night, like they're not gonna go that extra mile because they don't feel taken care of. Um,
Hmm.
and so,
There's too much of their mind focused on I'm not safe. If I
yes,
do one thing wrong, I'll get fired or
yeah.
things like that to let themselves be who they are to really welcome and be fully engrossed in the person in front of them.
Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
for me, some I guess like a concrete example from my life, when I started with Marriott, the property that I was at had no experience with flexibility in uniforms for transgender individuals. And so for anyone
Love this.
listening to this and not seeing my face right now, I identify as transgender, use they, them pronouns, transmasculine specifically. So I like can't even remember the last time I wore clothes that I purchased in the women's department, despite like my voice sounds like this. And at the time I even had long hair still. Um, but anyway, so my property did have a lot of experience in like allowing that flexibility for what made individual team members feel comfortable in their uniform.
Hmm.
And so when I initially said, I am really excited to work here, I think it would be a great addition to your team. And also, I would like to wear the men's uniform for the front desk. And that was when we had the gray sweaters with the blue and green ties and everything, or the like bright blue blazers and skirt combination for the women. And initially, the property managers were like, I don't know, like there's not really a precedent for this. And all I had to,
What year was that?
that was 2016, so 10
2016.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. 2016. And
Yeah.
in like a small town in Iowa, right? So even if like one Marriott already existed, Marriott is a big company, was already kind of like embarking on this work, but this small franchise property I was at had
Right.
just never had that
Right.
experience.
Yes.
And all it took was me saying, you are seeing me right now, like I feel very comfortable. I feel very in my own skin. Like I feel comfortable in all of that. And if you ask me to come to work wearing this like bright blue skirt and blazer combination with like the low cut blouse underneath, I was like, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Everyone else is going to be uncomfortable because it'll just be very clear that this is not like meshing in the way that it should be.
Right. And you're going to be
Oh, what?
focused
You're
on
right.
that instead of
Yeah.
being
Instead of being
you.
hospitable to my guests. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And
That's
so yeah, that's
such a
that's all it took.
perfect
And
example. That is
yeah,
such a perfect example. I'm
yeah.
loving that you brought that up. And I actually have a story about that too. At one of the hotels I've worked at, women could not wear pants. We had to wear a skirt. And
Mhm.
I talked about this many times, and it wasn't even because of sexuality or anything. I was freezing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The
At the
doors are
front desk, the doors are always
opening.
open. We were freezing in the
Yeah.
winter here in Chicago, and we were not allowed, and they would not budge on this.
Mhm.
And then I said I should not be forced into it, and I like talked about the whole thing about that. I brought it up as the
Mhm.
the woman man thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think, oh my God, that was 2005, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking that was crazy that in 2005 I had to fight to wear pants, and it was still a thing in 2016.
Yeah, just in a different way. And I think 99 times out of 100, people like managers want to be able to do the thing that is going to make their team feel safe and
Comfortable,
secure. Sometimes they just don't know what that is.
right?
And so I think having access to resources where they can have those transparent conversations without burdening their current team members is really important, right?
Yes.
And so,
And I think it's about that's the way we've always done it.
yeah.
I think we get a lot. Wait, what? You want to do something different? Yeah, the world's evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm love that you bring that up because that's something that I challenge people with all the time, right? I'll talk to school administrators or parents who will say, "Well, that's just how it's always been in our family or in our school or in our whatever." And I say, I hear that, and I know that like it can seem like just natural because that's how you've always done it. Tell me, why have you always done it that way? Like, what are your goals that you're trying to achieve, and are you actually still achieving those goals by continuing to do it this way? And I think
Hmm.
that can really shift people's perspective to be like, okay, for a while this was working in a way that I wanted it to work, and now it's not because things are changing around me. Our environment is always evolving, and if we can't evolve our own policies or comfort levels or behaviors or norms alongside of the environment, then you're always going to find yourself a few steps behind. And as soon as that happens, you start to like, you kind of start to notice that you're being a little bit behind, but then you feel really defensive and like you're going to dig your heels in on what you're doing. And it just
Yeah.
can create so much more tension and dissonance than is necessary.
Yes. So I want you to say that again because if you are a person who's trying to challenge what's always been, or maybe you're a leader who's trying to convince your boss to let your team, whatever the situation might be, well, how do you politely and professionally challenge that? I love what you just said. Say it again.
Yeah, ask why.
Yeah.
Ask why, right? And I always like to lead, and this is, taking it all the way back to one of those lovely Marriott acronyms, right? You're going to empathize first, right? Let them know. Of course, like I understand that this has worked for you in the past. I know that it is something you're very familiar with. It feels very second nature to you, but help me understand why you are still doing it like this. Tell me your goals. Help me
Mm.
understand what is our collective objective here, and are we still meeting that objective doing it this way?
Yeah.
I
Love
think
that.
that's a great avenue for change and
Yeah.
growth.
Fantastic. I love it. I also have a great huddle activity for change.
Oh my gosh. Please,
And
first,
you know
first
what
send
I'm
it to
going to
me
do?
and then share it with the people.
Yes, I'm going to say I'll send it to you, but I'll also put it in the show notes for everyone. If you are trying to change from your PMS system to new management company, any change you're trying to go through, I've got a great huddle for you.
Perfect. I can't wait.
Yes. Now, let's talk about retention and culture a little bit.
Yeah.
Many leaders are struggling with employee retention right now.
Mhm.
How does creating an inclusive workplace impact whether people stay or leave? And honestly, we kind of teed that up a bit right in the previous conversation, but any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's perhaps worth noting that that's really how you and I got to know each other was that in my current role, one of the things I do every year is host a conference for leaders who are not in the hospitality industry necessarily, but who are very invested in improving their companies and organizational like culture. Um,
Hmm.
and so I asked Christine to come and speak as the keynote for this conference, and that is how we got to know each other better. But I think there is absolutely a correlation, right? I think probably if you're listening to this podcast, have heard the expression before that people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, they leave
Yes.
leaders. And I think that that's really true, right? If you, especially if you like what you're doing, if you don't feel valued, if you don't feel psychologically safe or physically safe, even, um, it- why would you continue to feel loyal to that place of employment, right? Why would you encourage other people you know who are talented to join you at that workplace if you are already not feeling good about it? And when we're talking about inclusion in particular, we are not only talking about LGBTQ inclusion in the way that sometimes we talk about it, and we're kind of like checking those boxes, right? We're not saying like, okay, if you put pronouns in your email signature, you're suddenly going to have this inclusive culture. We are talking about really having this people first mindset when we think about what do our employees need? Do they need resources to help them secure childcare so that when they come to work, they
Mm.
don't have to worry about where their kids are? Do they need access to, I don't know, like certain food or beverage amenities throughout the day? Do they need access to a gym or a locker space? Like there are all of these things that you can be thinking about when my employees come to work here, what are their needs, right? And they go
Mhm.
beyond just do I have enough pens in the supply closet, right?
Right.
Um, and if you can be anticipating, and I always come back to anticipating needs, I think it is such an important piece of this puzzle. If you can anticipate some of those needs for your employees before they tell you they have them, that is going to go such a long way. And in more specific ways, that goes a really long way with transgender employees in particular. If the first time you as an employer ever consider what your protocols or policies would be or how they would apply to a transgender employee, so like if your new hire has a different legal sex marker than the way that they present themselves to your company, and you are HR is like, oh my gosh, what do we do with this? Which of course you don't know what you don't know, but if you're not thinking about that until you have that person who's ready
Right.
to be onboarded, then suddenly everybody is scrambling. That person's going to feel like a burden. It's going to be a much more uncomfortable process than if you had already been putting in the work to think about what that hiring process would look like ahead of time. And
Right.
so I'm a huge proponent of like interrogating your current policies and procedures. Why do you do it in the way that you do? If you're asking for certain information, do you know why you're asking for it? And if you can answer those questions, then that's going to just make your onboarding process for any employee who doesn't fit that mold that you're kind of already thinking about. It's going to
Hmm.
make that process a lot smoother and signal to them before they even start working for your company that
I
they're
thought about this.
appreciated. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
appreciated and valued there. Yeah.
Yes, and speaking of transgender, I had Lola on the show. In the show notes, I'll put Lola's episode. It was a two-part episode, and Lola is transgender, and I was Lola's neighbor for 20 some years knowing her as Elmo. So it was, just like a shock and whatnot. So
Mhm.
I had a million questions. And so I know, again, people are afraid to ask questions. You don't want to be too personal or you don't want to, offend anybody. And so she was so forthcoming and let me ask any question. And so this was where my mind goes. If I don't understand something, and I'm afraid to ask or tiptoe around it all, then I might be afraid to bring someone like that on my team.
Mhm.
Because as a leader, I don't know what to do or how to do that. So that's why right now, if you're looking to fill your team and be all inclusive and whatnot, to be proactive and learn more. The last thing I was gonna really ask you about is if for leaders out there, are there, because you just gave some great advice, but is there anything else that I haven't asked about that you'd want to share for those hotel leaders, hospitality leaders out there might be listening to help make that more inclusive, help make it more safe in their hotels? Anything else you'd share on that I didn't ask about?
Yeah. Listen more than you speak.
It's good.
Listen more than you speak. We talk about all the time the importance of active listening. And active listening really requires that you um, can kind of repeat back to whoever's talking to you how you are understanding what they're saying. And I think in leadership that's important because it gives people a chance to correct you if the way that you're interpreting what they said is not really what they intended. Um, but also I think there can be pressure put on leaders, and a lot of it I think sometimes is pressure we put on ourselves to be able to just inherently know how to fix everything. Um, and that's not really our job, right? It is our job to kind of steward the organization, steward the fixing, kind of like do the grunt work, but it is not your job independently to just suddenly know how to do it all.
Hmm.
And so if you can be a really active listener to your team, more often than not, they will tell you, even if you have to read between the lines a little bit, what they need.
Hmm.
Your frontline teams will tell you what is working and what is not working. You just have to give them the opportunity to do that
To
and
tell
be
them.
generally or genuinely receptive to that feedback. Um, yeah, listen more than you speak. Don't
I
just
love
assume.
that. And I
Yeah.
have a tip for everybody too. As a leader, we think we have to talk the most.
Hmm.
When we're having one-on-ones, we think we have to have all the questions teed up. But those questions might not have anything to do with what's keeping your direct report awake at night about. So
Hmm.
here is a great four power questions to ask. One is what's going right? Let's talk about what's going right. Let's celebrate. Two, what's not going right? And then they're going to have an endless amount of things that they can open up to you about just what's not going right. And then you can start talking from there. Three, okay, what are we learning from this conversation? And four, what will we do differently going forward? So that is a great way to open dialogue up without having to think of what the question is and just let them speak so you can listen.
Hmm. I
I'll
love
put
that.
that in the show notes as well. that little
Please
document.
do. I took notes actually as you were
Oh,
talking just now.
I love that.
Um, you are so good at always kind of having those like very concrete takeaways, which I always appreciate.
I love a takeaway, so I love to give a
Yeah, it's so
takeaway.
good. And I think it's so important with one-on-ones to provide that space. When
Hmm.
I'm doing one-on-ones with my direct reports, I'm usually like I have like a handful of things that I'm like, I need to touch base on these things. But other
Great.
than that, I want you to steer the meeting. And these are great questions to help you like if they don't know what to say to kind of prompt. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. And the reason everything I teach today is because I failed at it. I used to
Yes.
own those one-on-ones because I thought I invited
Mhm.
you, so I have to run it. I have to
Yep.
fill, and I think most of us, not you, Jordan, a
But
lot
I've
of
been
us,
there, right?
no, no, no,
Like,
not you and what I'm about to say. Most of
okay,
us feel like we have to fill the void with talk, 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 talk because we're the entertainers.
sure.
That is something I've always lived with. You're very good about not filling the void with just empty talk and listening to people. That was a struggle that I had. So we'd have these one-on-ones and we'd get nowhere because it was just what was in my mind, not what was
Mhm.
in their mind. And
Mhm.
so that's when I came up with my four power questions. So yeah, yeah, love that.
That's
Um,
perfect.
any other last minute advice for leaders listening today who want to build those workplaces? We kind of just said that. You said listen. Um, any last minute
Yeah,
advice?
listen, think about yourself as a lifelong learner, right? You can always learn more. You
Yes.
can always pivot and do things differently. The world is constantly changing, and again, we need to be ready to change with it. So seek out those resources. If you're not already connected with someone who you trust as a mentor, try to seek that person out. And it really can be as simple as, being like, I really admire what you're doing. Do you have capacity to be a mentor for me in this way? Like,
Mm-hmm.
seek those people out and people that you can trust to run ideas by, right? To say, this is what the problem I'm encountering. Here's what I've tried. It's not really working. Like help, right? And like
Yeah,
in
help.
creating those resources in your community can be really helpful too.
Yes, be a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Now, before I ask you the question from our previous guest, it's time for the one
Oh,
question. But before I
yes.
do that, I have to ask you about your beautiful babies.
Oh,
You and your wife have twins,
we do.
and they just celebrated their first birthday, right?
Yes, like
Yes.
right after I saw you. Yeah.
Yes. Tell us
Yeah.
what life for a year has been like with twins.
It has been different every day. They were in the NICU for the first month of their life, and so that was like
Oh,
a totally like sort of like out of time experience. Splitting time between our home and the hospital. But since they came home, very little sleep, lots of laughs. Our daughter has started standing independently in the last couple days.
oh,
And she is very advanced with her speech for being just barely 1 year old. And she has started saying baby, which is really cute and funny, but she kind of says it like baby. And she calls her twin brother baby all the time. And we're like, no, you are also a baby. Sometimes she'll call me baby, and I'm like, no, I'm daddy. Like you're the baby. And she'll be like, baby.
oh, that's so sweet.
But
And so you
no.
have a boy and a girl. I didn't realize
Mhm.
that. Okay, a
Yeah,
boy and a
yeah, boy
girl.
girl twins. And yeah, parenting, generally speaking, is a wild ride. It's incredible. It has made me very intentional with how I spend my time when I'm not at work. So I feel like I can be very present when I am at work and very present at home when I'm at home, and kind of that division has been really good for me. Um, and yeah, I mean,
Nice.
being a transgender parent is interesting, as I'm sure our listeners know. Everything when you talk about kids is very gendered, and
Mm-hmm.
things for children are very gendered. And so trying to raise kids who are very conscious and like aware of gender um, is a very interesting experience.
Yeah.
But
And because it's what I've always done, right? It's like
yeah,
how we all grew up, at least before. Um,
totally.
is there anything that you do differently to not gender?
We're not trying to like actively not gender them,
Okay.
but we are just trying to provide like room to be who they are and explore, right? And they're still so young, and so that
Yeah,
just
so
is like
tiny. Yeah.
everyone's playing with
Yeah.
anything, and we're just like we don't have the money or the space to have two completely different wardrobes, so they just like share clothes.
Right.
Um, But yeah, I think they are going to get so many messages about what it means to be a boy or what it means to be a girl from every place in their life outside of our house, that we just want our house to be a place where they can do the things that make them feel good and feel like themselves, and just kind of like have those messages like subtly muted, I guess, within the
Hmm.
walls of our house.
Love
So
that. That's interesting. Yes. Always trying to learn.
yeah.
All right. So your one question is,
All right.
what was the biggest risk you've taken in your career and what did you learn from that? You've talked about your career a lot, but I don't know if what you've already mentioned was the biggest risk or what you particularly learned.
I'm going to talk about this in pretty broad terms.
Okay.
The biggest risk that I took in my career, and I think I will preface this by saying that I think, especially when you're in the like sort of beginning of your career, especially at a place where you are hoping to stay long term. I say this with the early educators all the time, people who are in the first couple years of their teaching career. Um, every decision you make can feel very big and very heavy because you don't want to do something that is going to put you in a really vulnerable position, in a place where you're trying to spend a really long time.
Right.
Um, early on in my career, I had to really stand up to a leader who was very um, not conducive to a healthy and effective workplace. And that was definitely the way I was experiencing this leader, and it was certainly the way that my teammates were experiencing this leader. And being able to have the courage to go to HR and like have a conversation about this is really what the experience of the employees is like. Here
Hmm.
are the, very matter of fact, trying to, be pretty neutral in the way I presented that information and not let my very valid and real emotions about it kind of
Hmm.
preempt what I was trying to say. But really like have the courage to say, this is not a leader that we can work with for XYZ reasons, right? And that's like a very extreme example, but it is something that gave me the courage long term to trust my gut and to know that you don't have to have a leadership title to be a leader for the people around you.
That's
Um,
right.
and that I think was such a pivotal learning experience for me. And I don't wish anyone the experience of like having a leader that is so
Yeah.
bad that you need to take a step like that. But to just really know that what I was like 25 and my colleagues were like 21 and 22. And so like I was like the old person at the show who was trying to be like, okay, like I can support you in this, and we are going to work together to take the steps that we need to be safe and secure and be doing our work well and with integrity. And really the understanding that you don't need someone to bestow this title on you in order to act like a leader. And when we can have a team of leaders instead of a leadership team, I think that that really can go a long way,
Mhm.
in helping everyone at the organization feel empowered, everyone in your team feel empowered, um, and really grow into themselves. Because I think the most important thing about being a leader is the way that you are helping other people become leaders, in
Hmm.
their own right. So
Yeah. I like to call that influential leadership.
yeah.
And it does, and that's why I from the time I was 18 and ran my own first team, I said it does not matter what your name tag says. You are all leaders. We all have agency and ability to stand tall and
Mhm.
take lead.
Yeah.
And that to me is influential leadership. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, what a great lesson. Yes, yes. All right, Jordan, what question do you have for our next guest?
Okay. I've been thinking about this. Tell me if this is basic or gets asked all the time. Um, So you ask people what their yes moment was, like that big, like pivotal yes moment. I am very interested to hear what is a moment where you could not figure out how to say yes, and with the
Oh.
perspective that you have now, like what would you have done differently?
Love that. Okay. Oh, I love when it revolves around yes.
Okay. All right.
Tell me about a time that you had a situation you didn't know how to say yes,
Yeah.
and how would you look at that differently today?
Yeah. Or like what'd you
La
learn from that? Yeah.
Yeah, would you learn from it? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I love it.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, let me just say this, Jordan. That 17-year-old at Key Cove is looking at you now and is so freaking proud.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you feel that through and through because I feel I am so honored and proud to know you. You're an
Oh,
amazing person.
Christine, thank you so
Yes.
much. I think without even knowing it, owe a lot of that to the leadership and you put into Key Lime Cove. As
Mhm.
my first real work experience, I think that probably was a very pivotal thing for me.
Well, I love knowing that, but it's all you. It's all
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate
Yes. Thank
you.
you so much for joining us on
Yeah.
the Yes Show.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for today's show. Say yes to taking action and changing the world one yes at a time. And oh, my friend, will you say yes to review, like, and subscribe? The more yeses you give, the more juicy goodness I can bring to all of you wise pineapples. Cool or cool?